Big LEZ'S League, an all rugby league experience.
Hello, welcome back to Big LEZ'S League and all rugby league experience. Make sure you go ahead and subscribe to the YouTube, become a part of the Big LEZ'S League community. We've also got all of our socials down below, the TikTok, the Instagram, Spotify, Apple Podcasts. That is all down below, so make sure you get stuck into all of that. You won't miss any content if you go and follow the Spotify and Apple Podcasts. All different content, previews of every single game, reviews of every single game, reactions to certain other things as well. We did a big reaction to Regan Campbell-Gillard on the podcast the other day, which wasn't posted on the YouTube, so make sure you go back and have a look at that. But plenty of exclusive content, past interviews, stuff like that. Interviews we're going to be doing throughout the off-season. That'll be posted all on the Spotify and Apple Podcasts, and you'll get early access to those podcasts on the Spotify, Apple Podcasts as well. So make sure you go ahead and get stuck into those. Leave us a good review on here. Leave us a good review on Spotify, on Apple Podcasts, because it all helps in growing the podcast. Just got over 300 subscribers the other day, so I want to thank you guys for that as well. As I said, the community is growing, so make sure you become a part of it and share the podcast around with your mates and get stuck into it, because we've got plenty of content, as I said, coming out over the next few weeks, particularly going into the off season. We're going to really start to ramp up a bit of content, get some interviews going. As I said, I want your suggestions as to who you think we should get on the podcast as well. As I said, everything helps. Suggestions, questions, stuff like that, leave it all in the comments section below, and I'll get back to every single one of you like I always do. But let's get into the news. Obviously, some big updates throughout the weekend. I've picked out the top three. Then we're also going to talk a little bit at the end about the bunker and a few poor decisions in regards to the head-high tackles. I'll get up a stat for you as well just regarding that, but plenty to get through. Let's get straight into it. Josh Schuster to the South Sydney Rabbitohs, 1-year deal reportedly. It looks like it is all done, all ready to go. He was talking with the Bulldogs quite heavily. There was a lot of talk that he was going to go there. He was obviously talking with the Dolphins as well a little bit. Plenty of clubs going after Josh Schuster. And look, there's a lot of negative talk around him and obviously the path that he's taken at the moment where, he's struggled to get fit. That he's had a lot of issues with staying in first grade consistently. The main one, though, was effort and fitness. And look, I guess the big question with him coming into South Sydney is what's going to change? Is he going to put in 110%? What are we going to get out of Josh Schuster here? I think that by taking this $300K contract at South Sydney, he knows now that this is the reality of the situation. He needs to get the bottom contract, go to a team that is going to get the best out of him, go to a coach that is going to get the best out of him in Wayne Bennett as well, and really turn his career around. Get fit, get ready for the season, play the role that South Sydney needs you to play, and really thrive under Wayne Bennett. And I think we've seen a lot of guys thrive under Wayne Bennett. I mean, you only look this year at Tevita Pangai Jr., struggling to find an NRL club, was done with boxing, wanted to come back to rugby league, couldn't find an NRL club. The Broncos didn't want him back as of yet. And Wayne Bennett pulled out his arm and brought Tevita Pangai Jr. into that Dolphins side. Tevita Pangai Jr. has been very solid for the Dolphins as well. He's played his role perfectly. He's simplified his role a lot. You think of the footy that he played for the Bulldogs and the footy that he played for other clubs, the Broncos, the Panthers, even for that short stint that he was there. It was very ad-lib football, and he was trying to be the best player on the field. He was trying to make every big play. Wayne Bennett just brought him in, simplified his game, and he ended up being a better player for it. I can see the same thing happening here with Josh Schuster, and it's exactly what he needs, just to simplify down his game. I imagine he'll play right edge back row. And as I was saying to chaps on Rabbitohs Radio too, I think that it works well with our rotation. We are struggling for depth in the back row at the moment, South Sydney. To bring in a guy like Schuster, who you can chuck in the back row, it means that Keon can play in his best current position, which for me is in the middle of the park. And that means that he can bring him into the front row. Obviously, they were talking on Bloke in a Bar about having Keon and Jai Arrow starting in the front row with Tevita Tola coming off the bench. I think Jai Arrow comes off the bench for me just because of the fact that he can play a number of positions. He'll provide a bit of impact and go forward off the bench as well. Tevita's very good at starting games, Tevita Tola. So I think Totola We'll start the game with Keon. Keon a bit more mobile as well with Murray there in the 13 jersey. I really like that starting pack, and it just adds a bit of size to our pack. And I guess they're having the depth there with a few other guys coming in is just going to help us even more. Having guys like Tallis Duncan coming off the bench and playing his role. I mean, Havili's re-signed going into next year as well. You got that versatility there as well. Davey Mawali probably goes back to the bench. You've got Kepi in the reserves. I'm hearing South Sydney are going after Liam Knight. I'm also hearing a few rumours that the Bulldogs might end up giving Emre Gula, who obviously has signed there for next year, they might forego that deal and he might come to South Sydney. But I think that's depending on his management and stuff like that. That is only a real deep rumour. Might not even happen. But, South Sydney building their stocks in the forwards, and it's something that they've needed to do. I suggested earlier on in the year that they go into the Super League markets and pick a few Englishmen out, some young rising English forwards, back row, front row, to come out. Because there's plenty of them to come over to the NRL, give the NRL a crack, just even in the lower grades, and just build up that depth there. Guys you're getting for 100, 150K that are just going to come over and take that opportunity. I think that would have been worthwhile. But having Schuster there who can cover a ton of positions as well, if Cody goes out throughout the year, or if Whiten goes down throughout the year, you can chuck him in the 5'8 jersey, depending on who your 5'8 is anyway. If the 5'8 for next year gets injured, you obviously bring in Schuster. You can play that role. If it happens mid-game, you can bring him into that role, and he can do a good job for at that role. Obviously, if a centre goes down, he can move out into the centres and do a job there as well. If he gets fit enough, he's versatile enough to play a number of positions for us, and that's what I really like about this Schuster signing. And we know as well that at his best, with a simple game plan, he can be a very destructive player, and I think under Wayne Bennett as well, he's going to get the best out of him. There is just no doubt about it. So looking forward to this Josh Schuster signing. The big proponent for me is he going to be fit? Is he going to be in the right headspace? Taking the 300K deal, coming to a side that at the moment is struggling, but on the turnaround, obviously, with Wayne Bennett coming into the club. It's a good roster. It's a good coach. I think he's made the right decision. He's come here compared to his last contract on unders after missing out on a full year of rugby league. I'm keen to see the bounce back of Josh Schuster. Really can't wait to see it. But it is going to be very dependent on if he's fit. Kyle Feldt, looks like he's signed over with the Super League. Not sure how long. We know that it is with St. Helens. I think they've announced it. We'll have to go to their Instagram now. I'll have a quick look to see if they've announced it yet. But it's a big signing. Obviously they've had a bit of a struggle streak over the past 2 weeks. Particularly last week, I was watching their game in the pub at the Waterworks at Botany and just watching their most recent performance. They got flogged 46-6, I think it was the final score in their most recent game. So they've hit a bit of a brick wall at the moment, St. Helens. Obviously, Lewis Dodd, the guy that South Sydney had gotten, he's currently in and out of the side. They're just figuring out if they want to play him or if they want to continue with this younger guy, the number 23 there, that was playing a bit of fullback and halfback for them. I'm not sure his name because I don't watch the Super League too much. But, Kyle Feldt, though. Let's go back to Kyle Feldt. They have announced it. Great signing for them. I think Kyle Feldt has also recognised as well what time of his career it is. He is, going into his 30s. They are bringing through a lot of younger guys. I think Kyle Feldt's time at the Cowboys was going to come to an end over the next 2 to 3 years regardless. I think that Sammy Valame is a guy that's been waiting to come into first grade. Yes, obviously a bit of an up and down year for him. He's been playing centre in Q Cup at the moment. He's been going okay. But yeah, they've got him sitting in reserve grade, who obviously killed it the year before. They've got Jackson Purdue as well, who obviously will come in, I think, for Valentine Holmes. They've got Viliami Vaila. People forget as well, they've actually got Zach Laybutt sitting in reserve grade too, who was the starting centre, no question, last year. The big replacement for Peter Hiku. Obviously, he has just been sitting on the sidelines waiting to return. Tom Chester is going to be always sniffing around for a jersey somewhere in the back line, fielding in the centres and absolutely killed it. So they've got a ton of outside backs just sitting in the ranks waiting. Purdue more of a fullback 5'8 halfback. But, obviously played centre and killed it against the Roosters the first time. And then obviously has come in on a number of occasions and done a great job for them in the centres. So he's going to be sniffing around that jersey too. But just adding to what is already a monstrous amount of guys who are waiting for that wing jersey, and they're obviously waiting to take the next step. They're waiting to take the next step. They've got rid of two veterans here, the Cowboys, and Kyle Feldt and Valentine Holmes. They are ready to take that next step into the future. Obviously, Chad Townsend also going to the Roosters next season to, I think, do half and half, do a bit of media work, but also come and fill in when the Roosters need someone. Obviously, Clifford comes in. As I said, they are moving very quickly towards the future, and it could be one of the quickest rebuilds off the back of three veterans leaving the side that I've ever seen. They've gone to replace, or how they're going to replace, a monstrous amount of guys in such a short amount of time. It's very impressive. And the big thing is if it works. Is this going to work? All of the guys that they're bringing in, obviously, Purdue, I think, is a big chance of getting a spot just off the back of his performances this year and potentially the preseason that he's yet to have. Obviously, Zach Laybutt, for me, obviously put in a really good audition at the start of the year to get a spot. And I think that Todd Payton's going to have that start of the year in mind. But again, it is just going to be off the back of off-season. Laybutt, for me, is the favourite to get the vacant centre spot. As in regards to who's getting the vacant wing spot, I'm not sure. I'd even say that Viliami Vaila's spot is up for grabs, to be honest. I think that Laybutt could play on the right. Purdue could play on the left. And then in regards to Kyle Feldt's spot on the wing, we could get Viliami Vaila in there. We could also get Sammy Valame, who's been sitting and waiting for a spot. There is someone I'm forgetting about. I know it. And I know that you guys are going to hound me in the comments for it. But I know that they've got a ton of guys that are waiting for spots. So very keen to see what this Cowboy side looks like next year. It is going to be a very different backline to what we're used to. It's going to be a pretty different side to what we're used to for the Cowboys, I think. I think there's going to be a few positional changes here and there, which will be very interesting to see too for some guys. So very keen to see what this Cowboy side looks like next year. Hopefully they go okay with this little rebuild that they're doing here in the backline. And as I said, if it does work, it is probably one of the quicker rebuilds off the back of losing three veterans in Valentine Holmes, Chad Townsend, and obviously Kyle Feldt that I've seen in a long, long while. And speaking of the Cowboys as well, Jake Clifford, we spoke about him coming into this side and taking over the number 7 jersey. It looks like moving forward, he has re-signed long term, I believe, till 2028. It's a great re-signing. He's a very talented footballer. He's got a great kicking game. We've seen some great performances from him this year, and I think his time in the Super League was so, so precious to him, and I think it's helped him hugely in his development as a footy player. Obviously, his form at Newcastle 2 years ago, and just at the Cowboys before that as well. He was getting limited time in first grade. At the Knights, he struggled to be that main guy for them moving forward. They obviously let him go to the Super League, killed it in the Super League, played some really good football, matured as a player. I think that he's come back as a mature number 7 too. And I think the great thing about Clifford, I think he's only 25, 26 as well, Jake Clifford. So he's not, 26 years old. He's not that old. He'll be 27 next year, really getting into the prime of his career as well over the next few years. So I'm very keen to see how Jake Clifford goes, how he develops even further, this preseason that he's going to have with the Cowboys. I don't think he had the preseason with the Cowboys last year, or this year, I should say, because he had only just come back from the Super League late. I think he only joined halfway through the year to the Cowboys. But yeah, look, I am so keen to see him get a full preseason there in that number 7 jersey. And I think off the back of the footy that we've seen from him over the past 2 to 3 weeks since he's been in the side, I think he's ready to take on that role as well, Jakey Clifford. So keen to see how he goes over the next few weeks and how he ends the season, and obviously how they go in finals as well if they keep their spot. But he's been playing some really good footy. His kicking game, his timing, his performance last week was phenomenal. He was the halfback of the week for me, bar none. Cannot wait to see how he goes for the rest of the year. Let's quickly touch on the bunker. Obviously, a few bad calls in relation to high tackles. I'm going to get up a post that I put up today just in regards to some stats that Graham Annesley had chucked up off the back of the weekend and just some of the calls that we had gotten in relation to high tackles, but also just some of the amount of penalties blown, and then some stats for the season as well, just to get your head around the penalties specifically for high tackles. Now, the round 25 stats surprised me in the sense that this is not the total amount of penalties throughout the round. This is the total amount of high tackle penalties throughout the round. And for me, we'll talk about it after. Let me just go through this first. 30 penalties for high tackles this round. Just in round 25, 30 high tackle penalties. That is not including 6 again. That is not including offside or any other one of those other penalties, obstructions, stuff like that. It is 30 penalties alone for high tackles. 10 of the 30 were charged by the match review committee. So 10 of those 30 were charged by the match review committee, meaning that they went to the judiciary or they were handed fines, stuff like that. 6 out of those 10 that were charged by the match review committee were sin bin. So 60% of the 10 that were charged by the match review committee were sent to the sin bin. 5 of those 6 were grade 2. So one of them wasn't a grade 2. 4 of those 5 grade 2 charges were sin binned. Yeah, look, just a lot going on there, a lot to dissect. Just too many penalties for me. Way too many head-high penalties. If we go into the head-high penalties for this year, 342 penalties for high tackles in 2024. Year hasn't even finished yet. 300 plus penalties for high tackles in a season is insane. I don't know if the number looks big and you actually divide it by round and it's not actually that large, but it's a fuckload of penalties. It's more than 10 penalties a round. It'd be your average around 10 to 15 penalties a round, not including the 30 that we just got here. 27 were sin binned or sent off. 23 out of the 27 charges were grade 2 or grade 3. 18 of the 23 grade 2 or grade 3 charges were sin binned or sent off. Yeah, again, just a lot to talk about there. A lot to talk about. 78% of them were sent off or sent to the sin bin. Yeah, look, take what you will. It's just a lot of penalties. It's a fuckload of penalties. And then if you go by round, in round 1, we had 16. It goes 16, 13, 14, 13, 13, 11, 6 in round 7, which is good. 14, 11, 12, 16, 8, 10, 9, 4, 17, 13, 16, 7, 12, 7, 19, and then in the last 3 rounds, since they've really started to knuckle down on it, it's literally gone from 19 to 27, 27, 30. Just insane how many penalties have been blown for high tackles. And this is high tackles alone. Again, this is not for for offside. This is not for 6 again. This is not for obstruction. This is not for any of those other penalties, right? This is specifically high tackles. And I know they're cracking down on it. I know that player safety is a huge, I guess, worry in the game. Obviously, with the amount of head highs and the research behind concussion, the amount of players who have sustained CCE over the past few years has been huge. I know that, and I hope he doesn't mind me sharing this, but my boss at the moment, my mum's boss, and my boss as well, at Claim Central, who played for the Rabbitohs, Brian Seamson. He's also got CTE, went for tests on his brain. They got a bunch of footy players to go and do these tests, brought to you by the NRL. They obviously got a bunch of ex and former players to go in and do the tests on their brain. Long, rigorous tests, asking questions, getting scans done, long MRIs. I think it's like 2 to 3 hour MRIs on the brain. I know that Darren Brownie Brown was asked to do it, who's with us for Rabbitohs Radio. He didn't want to do it. But yeah, look, it is such a hectic thing. Obviously we've seen what happened to Paul Green. We've seen what happens to other guys in the NFL as well. The results of CTE and stuff like that. So I get that the emphasis around player safety, but I just feel like if this is if we're blowing 30 penalties a game, for high tackles, and, that's not including offsides and that, we're probably getting around 70, 80 penalties per round. When you're adding all of the other penalties up, I'm starting to think that the game is just over-refereed. I feel like if I know that, the people that like common sense are going to see common sense and beg for black and white, and vice versa. Obviously, we cannot decide between common sense and black and white. I get it, but there's got to be an element of common sense in the black and white. And what I mean by that is, look at a few of the tackles on the weekend. Let's have a look at the Corey Waddell and Taniela Paseka one, right? You look at that footage. I look at that footage. The referees look at that footage. You can tell that Paseka makes the worst contact out of the two, right, from Waddell. You can tell that Paseka, leads with the shoulder to the head. Waddell, lazy forearm. Waddell is getting 2 weeks suspension. Taniela Paseka is getting an $1,800 fine. I mean, the common sense, if you watch that video and look, they made the excuse on the video from Graham Mannersley, which I watched over and got these stats from. He was saying that obviously, different angles, different perspectives and stuff like that. But you could tell, the average Joe sitting at home could tell that was Taniela Paseka leading with the shoulder. And it's not even stuff like that where, they get it wrong with the player, which is horrendous with the amount of angles and the amount of times that they showed it, and the fact that the average Joe sitting at home could understand who making the tackle was. But how different games are refereed in different ways, and different referees and bunker officials have different perspectives on the game. I think that, and I've loved this suggestion on SEN. I forget who it was, but they made the suggestion of having a singular. I think it was Todd Carney who made the suggestion. Might have been Todd Carney or Scott Pruins, I'm pretty sure. But whoever it was, they made the suggestion that they should have one bunker official across all 8 games of footy. Changes every week, sure, if you want it to, but just one bunker official across all 8 games that sits in a box, watches over each of the 8 games, and makes the decision based off his perspective for all of the 8 games. So we're not getting a disparity in calls game to game. Week to week, if you do want to change it up each week, you might get a bit of a disparity week to week. But at least game to game throughout an entire round, we have consistency. We know what the precedent is. And I think that would ease a lot of confusion amongst the fans. Just having a consistent guy sitting in the bunker, making the decisions consistently throughout all 8 games of a round. I'd love to hear what you guys think about that, but I think that would, I guess, as I said, ease a bit of confusion amongst the fans, and also just provide a bit of clarity on what the precedent is. Around each ruling, what the perspective is, what the referees are being told to over-referee on, or to look closer at, what to look for. We know what that precedent is, so we can identify it as a fan sitting and watching the game as well. But I think that's a really good idea, just having a consistent referee in the bunker every week for every single game. Let me know what you think about that. But it would ease a bit of the confusion. We would get a lot less controversy around calls because we know what the precedent being set is. Some calls are always going to be controversial to some fans, but you'd get a lot less controversy around calls because, as I said, people would know the precedent being set for those rules. Again, let me know what you think, but that's my 2 cents on the bunker. Just consistency around calls, particularly obstruction calls. I think that disruptor is ridiculous, and it's refereed in some games and doesn't get refereed in others. Obstructions are super inconsistent. The blocker rule, we've got to talk about that quickly as well, just before we cut off. The blocker rule is ridiculous. I think that, again, common sense should be influenced in these decisions. For example, 2 weeks ago with the Phoenix Crossland field goal, Will Kennedy was no chance. Well, he was a chance. He got there. Will Chance got to Phoenix Crossland just before he put the kick up. He was still able to get there and be able to have an attempt to block the kick. He didn't block the kick. Obviously, he missed it. And there was a player standing in front of the kicker, which constitutes, I guess, black and white, an obstruction. But Will Kennedy got there and he made an attempt to block the kick. So therefore, if you're looking at it from a common sense angle, it shouldn't be for a penalty for blocking. Same on last tackle kicks. If the defender is able to get to the kicker on last tackle and make an attempt to block the kick, it shouldn't be a penalty for blockers. And then again as well, this is what confuses me, and I think that not many people have been talking about this as well. We have blockers who, obviously are attempting to, free up space for their kicker to make the last tackle kick. What's the point of having a blocker if the person coming to interfere the kick is going to get penalized anyway for interfering with the kicker? That's what I don't get, because we've seen a bunch of penalties with interference with the kicker on last tackle, whether it's a touch of the leg or stuff like that. We've seen penalties for interference of the kicker across a number of occasions this year. Obviously, Harry Grant got sent to the bin for it against Daniel Atkinson in the first game that Melbourne versed the Sharkies a few rounds back. We've seen it on a number of occasions here. Obviously, the Lockie Ilias breaking of the leg with Freddie Lussick in New South Wales Cup, where Freddie Lussick obviously got some time in the off the field with a suspension. But what is the point of having blockers to block kicks if you're going to get penalised for interfering with the kicker anyway? That's what I want answered from Gray and Annesley. I think that as well, if we're being very honest here, there is a little bit of a lack of accountability with those as well. A real lack of accountability. I think that they've definitely got to, own up to mistakes that they've made. And I guess it's hard as well. You don't want to own up to a bunch of mistakes and tell us everything that you've done wrong. But to have a complete and utter lack of accountability, to say, yeah, look, we may or may not have made the right call in this particular situation. They weren't showing any footage. It was a bit of a lack of accountability in this week's presser from Graham Annesley, in my opinion. You guys can watch it yourself. It's on the NRL app and make your own call there. But I just feel like there needs to be a bit more accountability there. They need to, sit down now, not at the end of the season, but now, and figure out what the move is. Obviously, with the one bunker official in the bunker, or less people in the bunker as well, I think is a big one. There's a lot of people in the bunker. You don't realise there's too much officials. One obviously is the main match review official, along with another one. They've got a few ex-players in there as well. So they've got a lot of people in the bunker, limiting the amount of people in the bunker, but also, getting one official in there, because they don't need two. You get one official in there who gives his perspective on the rules that have been set throughout the entire week. I think that should be discussed. And also just clarity around rules and getting a complete understanding across all referees in regards to how rules should be refereed as well. That's my 2 cents on it. Make sure you go ahead and subscribe to the YouTube, become a part of the big LEZ'S League community. That is all the news. Schuster to the Rabbitohs, Feldt to St. Helens, Clifford extends, and a bit of chat about the bunker. Any thoughts on what we've discussed or anything that I should discuss on the podcast in regards to news that I may have missed, or any points that you have in regards to what we have discussed? Make sure you go ahead and leave that in the comments. We will see you guys in the next one.